Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Jeanne Gallagher, Discover Rising Tides, How the Outside Makes the Inside Better. And I'm here with Denise Stegall. Hey, Denise.
Hi, Jean. How you doing today?
I'm good. How are you?
I am good, thank you.
As always, Denise is our longevity specialist or a longevity concierge.
Concierge.
Yes, it's like croissant. I always start her on that word. But you are not our longevity croissant.
Not today.
Not today, but we are going to talk about food today. So we're talking about food and nutrients. Is that right?
We are going to talk about food today. Sorry, audience, we're not talking about croissants. Maybe another time. Yeah, we're going to talk about food and preserving the nutrients when we are cooking. Because, I'm always talking about eat whole foods, eat real foods, eat them as close to the way nature made them, right? And so somebody asked me the other day whether they should be eating everything raw. And, I automatically think, well, yeah, salads are great. And then the more the conversation was, well, no, we should be cooking some foods, raw meat should be cooked because that could be, that could lead to illness. So we don't want to be doing that unless it's handled well, like with sushi or carpaccio. Um, but those aren't things that we usually make at home. We usually have somebody else, a professional, take care of that. So of course we want to cook foods because they make them safer, they make them more palatable, and they obviously make them more flavorful. Have you ever eaten a raw green bean?
Okay, so I'm gonna devil's advocate here. So a raw green bean right out of the garden is the bomb. I'm okay with that. Raw green bean at the grocery store, it's been around for a while, but yes, I am a fan.
So when I turned 40 a few years ago, I
Yesterday.
did yesterday, I did a detox where the whole concept was eating raw vegetables and for like 3 weeks. And there was a drink that you were supposed to drink, water with lemon and what was it? Maple syrup to keep your blood sugar
Mhm.
level pretty constant. So there were no highs and lows. And, yeah, there are some things that are pretty good. And yeah, green beans from the supermarket, not awesome. But also things like broccoli. We eat a lot of broccoli and cauliflower on a crudité, but you know what? They're not actually the best way to eat them because if you cook them, just blanch them a little bit, they actually are easier for your body to digest.
Mhm.
So that's just kind of a tidbit there.
Why is that?
There's a chemical element in both in the cruciferous vegetables that the body just does not love. Some people
Mhm.
have no problem with it, other people do. So it's kind of like, are you lactose intolerant or not? So, like I said, some people feel discomfort, but there is this enzyme, and I can't think of what it's called. I apologize. But what's important, though, when we're talking about cooking these foods, and of course, today I'm talking a little bit more about veggies,
Mhm.
is when you're cooking it, you still want to make sure that you're maintaining the nutritious benefits of the food. So, one of the first things that I think is really important and people kind of forget is choosing the right cooking method. In my course, 5 dinners in an hour, one of the activities that we do is we choose the cooking method. What are we cooking? How are we going to cook it? Because different cooking methods will affect the nutrition. One depends on the temperature, right? If you're steaming or blanching, like I mentioned for the broccoli and the cauliflower, that's going to preserve your vitamins and minerals because it's going to the food is going to just be in contact with the water for a short period of time. So it reduces that cook time. Long cook times, like if you're boiling or roasting or deep frying, um, higher temperature, which means you're already kind of killing the nutrients, but then you roast them for longer. Now, yes, they do taste good, like a roasted potato in the oven with a little bit of olive oil, salt and pepper, and rosemary tastes really good, right? You wouldn't want to eat that raw. Potato raw does not taste good. I
Yeah.
don't know how well that would be digested. But at the same time, you are losing some of the nutritional value. But at least you're eating a potato and not
Mhm.
necessarily a French fry.
That's true.
So think of cooking like the cooking method. I like to use this analogy of, the cooking methods are like walking down a path, like two different paths that lead to the same destination, right? You want your food
Mhm.
cooked. Some paths, steaming and blanching, preserve the beauty. When you steam and blanch vegetables, they retain their color. When they retain
Mhm.
color, they're retaining their nutrients. Versus other ways, especially frying and baking and roasting and broiling. Think about it, much more brown, kind
Mhm.
of color. So you go from, green, colorful to with blanching and steaming to kind of brown and more brown, shades of brown with the other higher temperature. Walking down the path, cooking food. So I mentioned blanching and steaming food. When you're doing that with vegetables, you actually do not need a whole pot of water. And I think that's
Mhm.
really where people go wrong is they fill the pot, they get it boiling, they put the food in, or maybe they put the food in and let the water boil. That's not a good thing. Water has to boil first, and then you stick it in. Because if you're letting the water boil with the veggies in it, you're already the vegetable or the the vegetables nutrition is already seeping out of it. So you really just want enough water to cover the veggies. And fork, this is really important. You need to use a fork, not a knife, when you're going to test for doneness. Why? Do you know why?
You're no, you're actually indenting in more than one spot. I don't know.
No, a knife is sharp. Of course, it's going
Oh,
to go through. Like your fork
oh,
isn't as sharp as the
they're
knife,
making
but
that.
people don't think about this. My mom used to do this. And so when I was young, I didn't know, to test it with a fork until I went away to college. And so she would take a sharp knife, a pointy sharp knife, and stick it in a potato or stick it in a piece of broccoli, and it went through. She's like, "Okay, they're done." And then they were raw, and in my house, they were either overboiled or they were raw. So that's really, really important. Note is when you're testing them is to make sure that you're using a fork rather than a knife. So why is this water thing important or using small amount of water? Your water soluble vitamins, vitamin C, vitamin B, will leach into that cooking water. So the less water you have, the less leaching you can have.
Mhm.
Um, think of it like you have this brand new, beautiful silk blouse, though it needs washing. And rather than putting it in, with a load of laundry and you put it on high, you wouldn't do that. You would put it on delicate with just a little bit of water and a little bit of the appropriate detergent, right? So you kind of want to baby that silk top. You want to baby your vegetables when you're cooking them as well. And the third thing I'll add when it comes to cooking your vegetables is to make sure you're not necessarily when you're boiling or blanching, this does not work then, but when you're cooking them in the other modalities, is
Mhm.
to make sure you're cooking with a healthy fat, olive oil, avocado oil, coconut oil, because that actually helps the absorption of the fat soluble vitamins A, D, E, and K, which of course we know we must have in our bodies. The other piece, which is kind of fun, is that the fats can actually help prevent oxidation of these different nutrients during the cooking process. So again, it's going to help you keep the nutrition in the foods that you are cooking.
Mm. Great tips. So before we go, tell us a little bit about 5 dinners in an hour.
Five Dinners in an Hour is a course that I created, oh gosh, a handful of years ago because people were saying to me, well, Denise, I don't have time to make dinner. And I'm a big proponent of prepping and planning. You know that.
Mhm.
So, Five Dinners in an Hour helps somebody to look at whatever their recipes are. Like I always say, pick chicken dishes to start with. And you can literally, using this program, it's maybe 6 pages. It walks you through how to cook literally 6 different types of chicken dishes, literally in an hour. Now, granted, when somebody first starts, it might take a little bit more than an hour, but think about if you can spend 1 hour on a Sunday cooking meals for the rest of the week. And when people get good at it, they can make a chicken dish or 2 chicken dishes. They can make a steak dish. They can make a stir fry dish, whatever it may be. But they can do it in 1 hour rather than every day kind of coming home going,
Hmm.
what's for dinner? Oh, I forgot to take meat out of the freezer. Maybe it's
Mhm.
Taco Bell night again. Never Taco Bell night ever.
Yeah.
Never
Good.
Taco Bell night. And the program, and I can send you a link to the program.
Mhm.
I think I forget where I have it off the top of my head right now, but I will make sure that you get access to that for the show notes.
That's good. That'd be great. So this is super great information, and don't overthink your cooking either. Keep it simple. Just and what's a nice little trick with the vegetables is if you're going to blanch some broccoli, blanch some broccoli. Blanch enough for a few days. So then it's in the refrigerator. And then if you're going to saute it in some avocado oil to heat it up, it's just there and you don't have to cook it for very long and it's ready in a second, but it's prepped and ready to go. So great
Absolutely.
tips for keeping the nutrients in your food.
Yes, don't compromise the integrity of your food.
Thank you, as always, Denise.
Thanks, Jean.
Hello, everyone. This is Jeanne Gallagher, Discover Rising Tides, and I want to just take a moment to talk about my friend, Denise Stegall. I am honored to call her as a friend, and I'm so grateful that she gives us her insight during our shows each show and talks about healthy living, eating real food. You hear Denise say, eat real food a lot. Well, she means it, and she knows what she's talking about. She is an amazing healthy living coach, curator at Living Healthy List. And if you ever have any questions about what is real food, why does it matter, how does that apply to me, how do I change, what do I need to do, how do I even create a healthy living shopping list, make sure that you call her. She is your healthy living coach, and you can find her at healthylivinglist.com.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Discover Rising Tides, How the Outside Makes the Inside Better. My name is Jeanne Gallagher, and welcome to the show. And I'd like to introduce to everyone Heather Stewart. Hey, Heather, how are you?
I'm great. Thanks so much for having me on. I'm excited for our conversation.
Oh, so am I as well. Before we get started, give us a little bit about your background, and then we'll jump in.
Ooh, a little bit about my background. I'll try.
Or a lot of it, whichever
Yeah,
bit.
exactly. So my first career, I did the traditional things that you were supposed to do. I went to university and I became a CPA because that was a good career to have. And, I did all those things. And about 15 years into it, I was a senior executive in this really large publicly traded company. I had the husband and the house and the cars and the stock options. And I was not very happy. I just felt like this was not the right place. I wasn't in the right place. So I started exploring other things. And fast forward a little bit, I ended up quitting my job and getting divorced, all kind of together. But I started teaching yoga. I've now been teaching yoga for about 20 years. I became a personal trainer. I went into the whole wellness space. I opened my own yoga studio. I went back to school and became a registered massage therapist. So I went from sitting at a desk 14 hours a day, knowing that it was not good for me, to fully into the wellness space. And at one point in there, I realized that people were asking me a lot of questions. about
Mhm.
how to help themselves. These were wellness people. People were coming to me for advice, and I thought, wow, I'm just trying to help them be physically better, but they keep asking me for advice. And then, you can't see the forest for the trees. One day, one lady said to me, Heather, you should teach this. And I thought, oh, that's a really interesting idea. So off I went, and I also incorporated business coaching to the health and wellness space, because I
Mhm.
found that they were really good at what they did, but they struggled so much because they just saw that business aspect as something scary.
Mhm.
Then I'm doing that, and 2021 hits, and I have a stroke, which was
Mm.
a bit shocking to me because I I did all the things to be well, and I was in the hospital, and it was during COVID. No one could visit me. There were no beds in the ward. I was in the ER for 3 days. I couldn't see properly because I had double vision. And I was laying there thinking, okay, what's my lesson? Why am I here? I was like, there's a reason that I'm here. And it was a 3-day silent retreat. It was a gift from the universe for me. And I realized that
One that you didn't actually plan on.
you don't plan on
That's a
these
great
gifts.
way that you put that, a
Yeah.
3-day silent retreat.
Yeah. I was like, thanks, universe. I'm listening now. And what it was I needed to expand what I was doing. So I had gone from this, intense type A corporate person to this yoga wellness person, and I needed to marry those two together. And using both sides of my brain, the left and right side, the male, the female, all of it, to help people harmonize. I don't use the word balance anymore. I use harmonize. Harmonize all the pieces of their life so that when they hit a bump in the road, like a stroke or a car accident or a loss of a loved one or anything, they have everything they need in place so that they can take the time to work on that thing. So all of this, the 3 days, it was a very productive 3 days for me. That's when my podcast came in. That's when my program came in. I was just lying there talking to my telephone, giving it my ideas because I couldn't see properly. And one of the things that I really recognized was one of the key things that people sometimes don't recognize they need until something happens is the community around them. We glamorize the lone wolf. We glamorize the super powerful individual standing on the mountain with their cape flapping or whatever. But in that moment, I was like, I can get through this. But it's a scary thing to have a stroke, right? You're in the hospital. At first, I told the doctors they were crazy, but I had to eventually believe them. But one of my friends found out what had happened, and she messaged everyone she knew that knew me, and even people she didn't know. And they all sent me voice messages because they knew I couldn't
Oh,
read. And I was just like,
oh,
oh my
wow.
gosh, this is a huge part of healing, right? It's such a huge part of
Mm.
healing. So that was a little aside, but that's how I got here today.
So there's a lot to unpack in this, but so it's interesting. It's interesting that, through COVID and having this experience during COVID really brings out the importance of not being alone
Right.
and the community piece.
Yeah.
And
Was so
wonder
good.
if this had happened post COVID or pre COVID, would you have gleaned the same things out of it? I wonder.
I wonder, I don't know if I would maybe because I wouldn't have been forced to be alone for those 3 days, like completely isolated. I mean, I was in the emergency room. There was lots happening around me. It was Halloween. It was a mid-city hospital. There was a lot of very interesting things happening in the emergency room. Let me just say,
To say the least.
some things I wish I could unsee, but
Uh-huh.
and if it had been a normal situation, my husband would not have left the hospital, but he couldn't even come in to see me. He was home
Mhm.
when he gets stressed out, he cooks. He was home cooking up a storm, you know. There was no lack of food when I came out of the hospital, but I think that being that isolated and something it is frightening. I mean, I'll say,
Mhm.
even though I wasn't scared, part of me was scared. Like I knew there
Oh,
was a reason
sure.
for it, but part of me was like, oh my God, what's going on in my brain? Because when you injure a body part, you can see it or you can feel it and you can wiggle it around. You can't, your brain is like that black box. You have no idea
Mhm.
what's going on in there. Is it a time bomb? What's happening? So I think it, COVID in many ways was a blessing for a lot of people, even though it continues to be a struggle for a lot of people. But I
Mhm.
think it brought home a lot of that community because we were forced not to have it.
Mhm.
And when you don't have something is when you realize, oh, but that's important. I want
Mm.
that. And I think it caused some binds to break because of maybe connections that weren't healthy, and some binds to strengthen, and some new ones to grow. I mean, I know some people who made new friends because they would walk the same park every day and they would see the same people every day. So they they became friends because they walked every day in the same park. They wouldn't have met each
Mhm.
other otherwise. So
Mhm.
community. And I know there's research that says that's part, like in the blue zones. I'm sure you've heard of the
Mhm.
blue zones. Part of it is community is
The
part
community.
of staying healthy and not being the lone wolf off by yourself.
Mm. You walked into that space with such a different background than many people that have something that um I wanted to say tragic, but such a maybe that is an appropriate word for what you went through. But you walked into that space with different tools than a lot of people have, and it gave you the ability to be so introspective,
Right. Yeah,
which
it's true.
is amazing.
And nobody's ever said it like that before. So thank you for that. That's a really
Mm.
interesting way to put it because I also have had, a 25-year meditation practice. It was not um I didn't have to face that challenging of being alone with myself in my
Mm.
thoughts.
Oh,
I
yeah.
I had the challenge of why am I alone with my thoughts for this long? And when the voices come up when you're meditating, I knew who they were. I'm like, yeah, you go back over there and go back to bed. I'm busy right now. So I think that's definitely set me up for that different experience. And I mean, that's part of what I try to help others with, find that way to understand who you are. We
Mhm.
spend a lot of time looking outside and being influenced by everything around us, you know, including our communities, our friends, our social media, who are our friends in quotation marks, are, all of those things. But some of my clients, when they come to me, don't even know who they are inside. So
Mm.
that's one of the first journeys to take. And it's a hard journey to take alone, really.
That's it's very difficult, and sometimes it is not the work that you want to do, but the work that needs to be done. Would you say?
Oh, definitely.
All the time?
Yes,
All the
all the
time?
time. I've been a meditation and yoga teacher for long enough that I can tell the people who aren't ready to sit and look at the insides of their heads just yet. So
Mhm.
I just ease them into it slowly.
It's amazing. I've had a very long yoga practice too, and I think I'm really good at avoiding that part.
There's your challenge.
So I know, right? There's my honest observation, self-observation. You said before we get into your current practice, you said something that I really want to delve into, and you said that, and I've never heard this before, but it makes a lot of sense. And you said the difference between harmonize and balance,
Right.
and how you've reframed that for yourself and for the people that you're working with. And how does that differentiate from each other for you? And what do you see?
So if you think about balance, so I know, and I used to talk about work-life balance. I was just thinking about this last night. I actually did a keynote speech one day on work-life balance. And I look back
Hmm.
now and think, wow, I've come a long way. But if you think about balance, it's like a tipping point, right? It's like the scent, like a
Mm.
teeter-totter. And when it's balanced, everything is static and not moving. And you can't move because you have to hold that perfect balance. And maybe you're making little twitches, but you're trying to stay in that one space where nothing is changing. So balance is
Mm.
like this static point where I think more of harmonize, because life life is going to throw things at you, and instead of trying to hold this rigid position of a center point, you harmonize by shifting. I mean, I just came back from guiding a 6-day kayak trip, and we hit some waves. It's like you have to let the boat float underneath you and you stay on
Mhm.
top, relaxed, and you make those adjustments that you need to make. And sometimes it's a bigger wave, so it's a bigger adjustment. But harmonize for me is more being in that flow of what's happening and not letting it tip you over, if that makes
Mm.
sense.
I love that.
Yeah.
Oh, it totally does. And I never, I've used the work-life balance conversation or um, name for quite forever. But I never really visualized what you just said. And it makes so much sense, because if you are in that balancing point, one thing that's added or subtracted can alter that,
Can knock you right
your
over.
balance.
Right.
Sure. But yeah, that's really phenomenal. And now did that change, having this realization, it must change how you are acting and reacting yourself personally, but also as you're talking to clients, that changes your perspective for them. Yes?
Yes, definitely. And often people will come because I did use it for a long time myself, work-life balance, work-life balance. And my initial entry into it was, you can't cut yourself into work and the rest of your life, because
Mm.
it's part of your life. So I started trying to keep them together as part of the conversation instead of cutting them apart. And then when I saw all of these shifts happening, and even that my friends around me are having some big shifts happening, finding a way to help them stay afloat. So
Mhm.
as people come to me, even the clients that I'm working with, they'll come to me with one thing, and then we'll realize, oh, actually, to help this, we need to shift something over here instead to support that, so that that can operate better. So it's like a Jenga game. Life is a Jenga game,
Mhm.
right? It's like moving some of this around, moving some of that around, keeping the tower tall.
That's right. Yes, it's a great analogy.
Right.
And don't pull out that wrong one.
Don't pull out the wrong support, or you start over. Well, I've
Yeah,
started over a few times. Starting over isn't so
a few
bad.
times.
People
Mhm.
get really worried about it, but it's not so bad. You will survive it.
And so now that you tell us about your philosophy now, and what do you do, and how do you handle your work with people, and what areas do you focus on, and what do you look for?
So part of what happened in that excitement in the hospital was my program
Your
and
3-day retreat.
my 3-day retreat. And this program came in, and I've actually just trademarked it recently, so I'm pretty excited. Woo-woo. It's called the Thriving Life Method, because I've traveled a lot. And someone asked me the other day, why do you travel so much? I said, because when I go to these countries, I can see every human really wants the same things. They want to be
Mhm.
happy and healthy. They want to thrive. They want love and companionship. And sometimes that gets distorted. So, and you start to focus on the wrong things, or the things that aren't going to help you get these things. So the Thriving Life Method incorporates 6 areas of wellness, and I love acronyms. It spells the word become. So the first thing is your body or your physical health, then your emotional health, your community, which is the people around you, your relationships, your occupation. And it's interesting, not everybody is working. I have a client who's retired. She calls it her beloved vocation. I thought that was beautiful. OM is money, your financial health, and then E is your engagement, your greater purpose, your passion, your bliss, whatever you want to call it, your divine soul journey. And when I first start working with clients, it's just, we need to take a really honest look at where you are. And I help people with that, that look at where they really are in life versus what they're posting on social media, because that's not real.
No.
It's not real, friends. So you don't know what's going on inside someone unless you pause to ask them and hold that space for them. And I spend a lot of time listening and asking questions. And we go through a process to look at, we just chart out those 6 things and say, where are we on those 6 things versus where we want to be on those 6 things? Like an honest evaluation. And then where to begin. So sometimes it's right away. You can say, oh, we're going to start with this, because as you correct one. So an easy example is when you're sick or unhealthy, it impacts your emotions. It impacts your relationships. Maybe you can't work. If you're an entrepreneur and you get sick, who else is going to do the work? So it impacts your financial health. So we look at those 6 aspects and we say, where will we get the biggest hit first to help lift up the other ones? Like, I love the rising tides, because lifting one of those lifts the other ones, right? And then we come back, we start easy things, right? Things for your real life. Start putting in some little switches that are going to help you get that thing working a little better. Come back, check in. Is it working? Can we add new things yet? Because you don't want to overwhelm. Or is that working well enough that we can switch to something else? So we keep working on that. And at some point, the clients will say, I feel so much better. So I don't let them just run off and into the sunset. It's like, here is your program of, you're going to reevaluate every month where you are so that you don't fall off track and go back into old patterns. And sometimes they'll come back, a few months later and say, I just need a little tweak and check in. I'm like, that's perfect. Let's tweak it. Let's check in. Sometimes they just want a monthly accountability or something. But I love when people get to that place. I mean, business people would say, Heather, that's a terrible business model. I love when people get to the place where they are empowered to take control of their own lives. Because my goal is for people
and put you
to,
put in so they don't need you.
yeah,
Right?
so they don't need me. So my goal is to put people in charge of their lives, empower them to do that, be okay doing that, and then send them off into the wilderness of the world.
Do you find that when you're reviewing these 6 different areas, they'll say, well, I really need help here, but that's not where they really need help?
Yes. Yes, all the time, because part of it is, it's normal in our world. I need to lose weight. I need to look good, but which is the most common one, I need to make more money. So like a need to make more money question. It's like, why do you need to make more money? And if you keep asking why, you will get down to the real reason. So I think it was on somebody else's podcast that I was listening to. There was a story of a woman who, this is back when people had typists still. Do you remember typewriters? I had typing class in high school. She wanted to learn to type
I
faster.
ignored typing class in high school, and I can tell that. I can still tell that now.
Right. Yeah. Darn it. If I'd only known. But this lady wanted to learn to type faster. So why do you want to learn to type faster? So I can make more money. Why do you want to make more money? And it drilled down and down and down and down, because she wanted to move somewhere in the suburbs. She wanted somewhere with a garden. But it came out that was because she and her mother lived in apartments in the inner city, and she wanted to be able to move her mother to the country with a garden as she aged and look after her. So there's lots of ways to do that other than typing faster, right? So if you can get to the reason you want it, you want the thing that you want. What she wants is a home with a garden to look after her mother. So once you're like, okay, I got that goal. So now, what are the myriad of ways that we can figure out how to do that versus I need to type faster? So
That's interesting.
yeah, you just have to ask why. It's like a 2-year-old. Why?
And so what are people's response when you drill down and you find out that true the true area that needs work. How do people respond to that?
Well, sometimes they are shocked
Mhm.
because they never connected those dots together. Sometimes they'll say, oh, if I had thought about that, I would have realized that. You know, because at
Mm.
some level, you know the answers inside of you. You
Mhm.
just never stop to ask yourself the questions of what's driving you. You know, sometimes it's fear that drives people. You know, I'm afraid
Mhm.
I'm old and I have no money. Well, let's talk about what's driving that fear. You know, are you actually old, or do you just have this concept that you're old? And how much money do you need? Some people chase money without understanding why they're chasing money. They just think it's something that they
Mhm.
need to have, and they don't have any idea of how much they actually need to have. So let's break that down. Let's figure out what that actually is. There's just, I mean, a lot of things that happen in life. We're molded early in life with our um, things that we react to, and sometimes we've never stopped to question why. So if you can
Mm.
unpack it and see if it's a real fear for you, then maybe you can take a different road, right?
Mm. Yeah, very true. And so there's I think that there's two levels to that. The first level that we come across right now, which is different than it was 20 years ago, is the pretend land of social media, and how the socials have really changed our perception of ourselves, or our perception of self-doubt, when we're looking at somebody else's information that's not an accurate representation of where they're currently at. So there's one piece, but the other piece that comes into play here too is that it's very challenging to be that self-reflective without somebody guiding the conversation and how important of what you do.
Right. It's true. And I sometimes invite people to have a social media via holiday. You know, it's
Mhm.
like, I know that a lot of business owners use social media to help promote themselves, but I read this book a few years ago called 24/6 by Tiffany Shlain, and she made such a good case of why 24 hours a week you take a complete vacation from all electronics, like
Mm.
TV, everything. And that doesn't have to be you being alone in a room self-reflecting, but that time away from it gives you that pause to think about how good your life is. Because if we spend all of our time looking at how good everybody else's life is, or they're posting that it is, then you don't pause to look around you and go, wow, I have a really amazing life and I have
Mm.
everything that I need. I think social media has created the FOMO of life. You know, it's like they're on the top of a mountain.
Mm.
Oh, I'm not on the top of a mountain, but you're somewhere epic. You know, it's like I was up in Georgian Bay, if anybody knows where Georgian Bay is, and I was kayaking, and somebody was posting pictures of their trip to the Arctic on a ship. I'm like, wow, that's amazing. But look where I am. You know, it's like I'm
Right.
somewhere amazing too. Maybe someday I'll go look at that amazing. Right now, I'm going to enjoy this amazing. And if when people, sometimes people, when they start having those internal conversations, I just remember the second half of your question, they go into this spiral of
Mm.
the doubt and the voices that they haven't identified in their heads. We have lots of people in our heads talking to us. I hope it's not just me. Right? But
No,
they go in,
no, I think I have a couple. I think I
right?
have some of your friends, maybe.
Maybe, maybe, but they go into that spiral, and without someone to kind of, I have a friend who, she's like a cocker spaniel. Sometimes I just have to grab onto her and say, stop running around and breathe. So if they go into that spiral, they need someone to just grab a hold of them and say, just take a couple breaths right here and just like pause. And also someone to share what's going on with them, because sometimes it's not something they want to share with their circle, their community,
Mhm.
because of that fear of judgment, being kicked off the island,
Mm.
sounds too crazy, is too personal. They need someone impartial and non-judgmental who can just sit
Mm.
and hold the
Yeah.
space, right?
That's true for so many different areas of where work needs to be done. I find the same thing as well when I'm sitting down and talking about financial things with clients, that it's
Right.
that creating that safe space of no judgment, of it is okay to it's important to talk through these things, but also there has to be a comfortable, safe place where the self judgment isn't available either.
Right. And it's true, like
Hmm.
money is one of those things that people are so fearful around, and
Mhm.
they don't want people to know if they're in financial difficulty. They'll work harder and harder to hide it, and they'll get themselves into more and more trouble. And I'm just
Mhm.
thinking of, I read Jen Sincero's book, You're a Badass at Making Money. And she made a comment in the beginning about money is taboo like sex. You're not supposed to talk about it, but you're supposed to be good at it.
That is a great comparison.
Right?
That's a great comparison. So what do you think the tools that you figured out yourself, or how did you make the transition from CPA Heather to yoga massage Heather? And because that transformation and that transition that you experienced had to have laid the groundwork for helping people through their work for what you're doing now. Do you think?
Oh, absolutely. So my first step out of corporate, I had a friend who I had a woman say to me recently, she said, "You're so brave." And I've never considered myself brave at all. But my first step out of corporate, I had a friend take me out to lunch, because he had heard that what I was doing, that I was, leaving my career. And
Mhm.
he was quite honest. He said to me, um, I was going to take you down to the mental health facility because I thought you'd lost your mind. And
Wow.
I'm thinking, all I'm doing is leaving a job. Like, how is that insanity? So
Right.
so part of, I mean, it's interesting. I had started practicing yoga because of a vice president that I worked with. And I was going
Mhm.
to yoga after work for stress relief because my job was quite stressful. And one day, so I had already started that foundation of finding that this life is really unhealthy and I want something healthier for my body. So I thought I could fit it into my corporate life at that time. And then I was rushing to yoga to relax. And Toronto has a very busy intersection that it's like 4 lanes in each direction. Well, it has more than one of those, but the one that I was driving through it and there was a pedestrian in front of me and I started yelling at them and they looked at me and I looked up and my light was red. So I had no idea that I was driving through a red light. Somehow I didn't get hit by the cars coming in either direction. So that was my first wake up call. The stroke was the second one. It was like that sudden realization of this is not sustainable as a way for me to operate in the world, and I have to find a new way to do it. And
As you're
being
stressfully rushing to a peaceful place, in quotes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So so when I got there, I talked to my yoga teacher, who is a good friend of mine. She lives on the West Coast. She moved to the West Coast a little while after that, and she said, "Heather, the universe sends you messages, and maybe this is your message that you need to change something." So that was like this. Luckily I was meditating at the same time too. So I would just sit and go, what do I want in my life? What is it going to look like? And I didn't have a coach at the time, how am I going to get myself there? So the tools that I built for myself, really. Right. And I had a meditation teacher and a yoga teacher to talk to. So that was helpful, but
Mhm. Mhm.
they were probably sick of listening to me.
And as you look back through the process, how are you different?
Oh my gosh. I am immensely different, and it doesn't stop. Even in the past year, I've changed quite a bit. And I think what has happened is I am not, I mean, I mentioned it about the stroke. I'm not afraid anymore of what's going on in life. And fear can show up in so many ways. Like fear can show up in endless disguises that will try to keep you small, try to keep you from doing what your heart is calling you to do. So I think that having jumped off the cliff once and quit my career, it makes it easier. It's almost like, you know, the first time you give a speech and you don't die, you're like, oh, I didn't die. I think I could do that again. So it's like I keep pushing a little bit more and a little bit more, going, well, and I stay curious. So part of my ability to get to where I am is, instead of that closing, when something didn't work, instead of going, oh, back into my shell, said that didn't work. I wonder why, or maybe it was the wrong thing. And then I'll meet people. I'm like, that's interesting. I want to learn about that, which is how I ended up being a kayak instructor. I just thought, that's interesting. Let me learn about that. That's interesting. Let me learn about that. So all of the things that I've been doing is staying open and curious. And that requires a level of courage with people, right? Because if you're open, depending on your background, you can feel like you're open to attack or your or previous experiences. But understanding that an attack on you is not about you. If it is an attack on you, it's about that person's fear. And we can know that intellectually. It's when you can understand it kinesthetically, heartfully, whatever the way you want to think of it. It's like you can know what a broken bone feels like in your brain, but until you feel a broken bone, you don't really know what a broken bone feels like. So being courageous enough to know that someone's attack on you, big or small, is not about you, and not taking that burden on, saying thank you, but I'm not accepting that gift from you, kind of thing. It's a different way to,
as the saying goes, what people think of you is none of your business.
Exactly. And people will say that, but they don't really believe it. Do you know what I mean? It's like, how many likes do I have on my Instagram? Oh, I don't have any likes. Nobody likes me. I'm like, who cares how many likes you have? Come on. It's like, or the first time I had a troll on one of my podcasts, I thanked him very much. I'm like, thank you for your opinion. That's awesome. And then I had a conversation with him because I thought he was wrong and he thought I was wrong, which is totally fine because, you know, your truth is your truth and your truth is your truth. Right. So yeah, I mean, the biggest things people can do is be, even if they just crack the door open a little bit because they're scared, just crack it open a little bit, use your voice, share your voice with the world. You have something to share with the world, no matter how big or small it is. I also read Akashic Records, and I was speaking with a lady this weekend who said, what's my purpose? What's my purpose? I said, she wanted it to be something big. I said, what if your purpose is to have a really nice garden that people enjoy? Like, that's a really amazing purpose because I love gardens. So it doesn't have to be TV, social media. Your purpose is what makes your heart sing. And you have to be open to hear the messages, right?
Your purpose is what makes your heart sing. That's beautiful.
Yeah. This makes my heart
beautiful.
sing.
Thank you. And so we're both singing then.
Yay!
So what, is there a typical type of person that seeks you out or that you feel called to or that are called to you?
I feel that a lot of who I talk to are women, although I have, you know, coached men and they're awesome too. But a lot of people who seem drawn to me are women in that phase of their life where their kids are either old enough or grown up, and they've spent so much of their life looking after their kids and or careers and or entrepreneurs, where they've reached this point where it was like, okay, is this all? You know, it's like, I thought there were supposed to be rainbows and unicorns, and I'm not happy. So it's like, I call them overwhelmed overachievers, though they would never identify themselves as that. But it's like, you're feeling like life is just not exciting anymore. You know,
There's got to be more.
there has to be more to it than this. And I don't know what to do anymore. I actually had a client once who said to me she had no idea what made her happy. And I thought, that's tragic that you don't know what makes you happy. So we had to unpack that a little while to figure out what actually made her happy. She knew in there somewhere, but she didn't know at that time.
Well, kudos to her, excuse me, for realizing that she didn't know.
Yeah, exactly. So
Yeah.
if you don't know, this is a perfect time to figure it out, right?
Mhm.
It's never too late. I have clients in their 70s who are still figuring it out.
So tell me about your podcast.
Ooh, my podcast. Yay. And you're going to come and talk to me. So
I
my
am. I'm
podcast,
excited about
yes.
that.
The podcast also came in my 3-day retreat. It's called Back to Me. Big surprise. Back to Me, Wellness Your Way, where I talk with people like yourself every week about some different way of thinking, some different way of approaching the challenges that you have in life. And I love it because, first of all, I meet really cool people and I learn so much. Every person I talk to just adds a little tidbit of knowledge. I spoke with a sexual fantasy expert, if you can believe it, and she blew my mind. Like, she was so smart and intelligent and not at all what I expected. You know, I've spoken to authors. I spoke to a guy recently who wrote a book on Buddhism, which was brilliant. I thought I knew a lot about Buddhism. That man, he knows a lot about Buddhism. I've talked to financial planners. I've talked to tarot card readers. I've talked to psychics. You know, anybody who is what I tell people coming on my podcast is, I want you to bring something to help these people. That's all I ask. And I want to talk about how to help people. And if you're trying to help people, I want to help you help people. So I'm trying to spread the love into the world.
That's fantastic.
Denise should come and talk to me too.
Yes. Well, yes, we'll make sure that happens.
Yes.
And so where do people find you for either the podcast or for your services?
So you can find everything in one place, heatherstewart.coach. And it's an EWART.
Thank you. Heather, this has been wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing your story and in lighting the world on fire and empowering people. So thank you.
Thank you so much. It's been so awesome chatting with you, and I can't wait to chat with you some more.
I'm looking forward as well.
Thank you so much for listening today. Today's show is sponsored by Seaside Solutions, my financial services company. As a business owner, it's easy to be pulled in many different directions, and often taking care of yourself plummets to the bottom of the list. For me, I find myself outside to reground. My time outdoors helps me manage my day more effectively and be more present for my clients. Through this, Discover Rising Tides was born. At Seaside Solutions, we truly believe that education is the foundation of financial wellness. Our primary focus is to provide guidance that is designed to help you achieve your long-term financial goals and visions. Working with a plan allows space for doing more things that you love, like being outside to make the inside better. If I can help you create or realign your plan, or if you would like to be added to my weekly newsletter, please let me know. This week's topic was 5 ways to set more achievable goals. Your referral means the big, beautiful world to me. And if I can help, please let me know. And thank you so much for listening, and see you next time.